Everything we do here at James Project focuses on caring for vulnerable women and children because we believe that's the call that God has placed on every one of us as Christians.
We're back with another James Project podcast, and today we have Samantha Moore with us. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me to be on today.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Well, we live in a suburb of Kansas City on the Kansas side. I'm married for 25 years to my husband TJ, and we have two grown children. Sydney graduated last year from college and got married a few months later, and she lives in Denver. And then our son Caden is at K-State. He's a sophomore.
Nice. So, did you grow up there? Is that where you've
I
always
did it.
been?
I was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Oh, gosh.
Moved Oshkosh, yep. Moved to Appleton, Wisconsin for a couple of years. And then when I was about 4, we moved to Michigan, a suburb outside of Detroit. And I lived there until 6th grade, which is when I moved to this area in Kansas.
So the rest of your family lives in that area?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of extended family left. Some is in Wisconsin. Some is actually in Indiana. But my brother, I have one brother, one sibling. He's 7 years older than me, and he and his family live here like 20 minutes from our house. So
That's nice.
yeah, most of them are right around here.
Good.
Yeah.
So, tell us, how did you get introduced to the James Project?
Well, we went on a mission trip as a family in 2019, but I think it was 2018. My parents got invited to a donor information event at someone's house through our church. They met Tiffany there and learned about the project and their mission and all the work they were doing down in Guatemala and shared that with me. And I was immediately interested. I have a passion for nonprofits and mission work, and went to an information meeting at our church about the mission trip and came home and told my husband and kids that we were going. So,
And they were on board or not on board?
they didn't push back too much. I've come to find out since that they weren't real excited about going down because it was over spring break and, there's other things they could think to do. But but I just decided that it was going to be something that we should do as a family. And it was a truly life-changing decision. So,
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's kind of sparked your further interest and involvement with the James Project, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And it was shortly after that trip that Tiffany and Brian approached me about being on the board.
nice,
Yeah.
nice. So, tell us a little bit about your family history. When we had talked before, because your family has a history now of
Mhm.
legacy type giving, but it wasn't always that way. So, tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. So my parents started off relatively low income. They were very much paycheck to paycheck or worse. Worked very, very hard, sometimes several jobs. My dad, pretty much through his whole career, worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Started out, um, kind of pumping gas as a mechanic, those kind of jobs, and ended up working his way up first in Kmart and then in several other retail organizations. And ultimately, just by working with integrity and making really good decisions in his job and having a very, very amazing work ethic, he ended up being very successful in his career. And they found themselves in a place of being humbled by that success and by the blessings that God had put in their life. And there was one point in the last 15, 20 years where my mom kind of asked my dad, why have we been so blessed? Why us? And what do we need to do with this? And it was kind of at that point, while they've always given to church, they've always given, for a lot of my dad's career, they gave to United Way. Initially, it was because the company had required it. Um, But even then, through United Way, you can designate funds, and they always made sure the funds were going to Christian causes. But they kind of determined at a certain point that it needed to be more, and they needed and wanted to make it a central part of their life and their legacy.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of explains why your family's invested in generosity.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I actually talked to my dad before this podcast, just to kind of like, I've heard the story for years and years and years and been a part of it, but it was interesting just to get his take on it again. And, um, some of the things that you hear from people, but like you never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. Like you can't take it with you.
Mhm.
It all belongs to God in the first place. It's all his, and he just entrusts some of it to us, and it's kind of up to us to decide what we're going to do with God's money.
Yeah.
People say, well, you can't outgive God. Well, then I also think he likes it when we try.
Right.
So there's just a lot of, I think, a recognition of how small and insignificant we can be, in the scheme of things, and how great God is, and just a awareness that it's not in what we're doing, it's what he's done and what he's given to us, and
Mhm.
kind of a challenge to us, and in many ways a commandment, um, to give back and to help our brothers and sisters in Christ.
Mhm. Well, and Jesus says we'll know them by our fruit, right? Or by their
Absolutely.
fruit. So,
Yep.
yeah, that outpouring of what he's given us to pour it back out to others
Hmm.
is really, like you
Yeah.
said, what we've been commanded to do. So,
Yep. And the scriptures are ripe with, Jesus telling people, his followers, to give back and to help people, and just about how God is pleased with that,
mhm,
and like just how he can do abundantly more than we can ever think or imagine or dream
mhm,
possible. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just something that my parents have found is important to them, and leading their family
mhm.
through this, a life of generosity. So
Yeah, yeah. And, I've heard people say God doesn't need our money, and he doesn't. That's not what it's about. It's about what it does for us as well, right?
right,
Like,
100%.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll
And it's not even like, one thing that I think is important for people to realize is generosity is not all about money.
mm,
It's I truly believe, and I've come to realize this in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, that generosity is not about your checkbook. It's not about a dollar amount. It's about your heart. And
mhm,
so, giving money is important. Giving financially is important. Sharing the financial gifts that you've been given is important. But giving of your time, giving of your kind words, giving of your prayer,
mhm,
um, just giving of your whole person, the person
mhm,
that God put on this earth for this time and for a purpose. It's giving it all out to glorify him. So,
mhm. Yeah. I mean, Jesus summed it up with the two commandments: love God and love others as yourself. There's
mhm,
not talking about money,
right.
but love is, determined
Yep.
by what he's asking us in that moment. How should we love? Should we give money?
Right.
Should we be giving our time? Should we be giving encouragement? Should we be showing up
Yep.
for someone? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing about that commandment and how he talks about it, in Matthew, is, one of the podcasters I listen to frequently, she highlights that frequently, and she says, and I never really thought of it this way, that God's not telling us to love ourselves, because we already innately do that more than we probably should.
Mhm.
And he recognizes that we're, selfish by nature, and, gonna think of ourselves and protect ourselves and put ourselves in the best position possible, just naturally, innately. He's asking us to do that for others.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Exactly.
I think a lot of people take that verse out of context and say, oh, well, we should love ourselves. And
Mhm.
no, we're going to love ourselves. Like that's
Right.
just in our being. It's
Mhm.
loving others as we already do love ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mhm,
I think there are some people that don't love themselves, and I
yeah,
think that's where the first part of that commandment comes in, to love
right,
God and let
right,
him love you so that you can love
right.
yourself. But yeah,
100%. Yeah,
I understand where you're coming from. But
yeah,
yes, by nature, we love ourselves
yeah, right.
too much.
Yes. Yeah.
So you had mentioned that your family had transitioned at one point to nonprofits that were more specific, um, like the United Way. They could
Hmm.
tailor their giving to Christian organizations, and
Hmm.
then they later moved on. Tell me a little bit about what that transition was like.
Well, I think I can't speak for my parents as much as far as a transition goes, because I feel like they've almost always given to Christian causes. Personally, the first nonprofit I was intimately involved with on a board level was a secular organization
Mhm.
doing amazing work, and I still think they're doing amazing work. And there are a lot of non-faith-based organizations that are still being the hands and feet of Jesus. But I kind of switched to focus more on organizations that do have that faith component, simply because I think one of our family goals is to make heaven crowded.
Mm.
And, if even, and this was something my dad mentioned when I talked to him, but if he said when, he gets up to heaven, if there's even one person that walks up to him and says, I'm here because,
Mhm.
you gave to this organization, or because in Bible study you told me about the love of Jesus, or, I mean, there is no greater gift we can give someone than salvation.
I know.
So,
Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah. To open that door for them. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, tell me about how living a life of radical generosity kind of impacts your family.
Oh, so many ways.
Because your family's kind of unique in this, I think. I mean, I hope there are other families, but when we talked
Yeah,
before, you shared how it's structured and how it's designed for every generation of your family to
yes.
participate. And
And I
so,
mean, I first want to say like radical is subjective. And yes, I mean, I think the way our family does things would be categorized as radical generosity. Um, but radical is, I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much time you have. Um, I don't know, it evolves. And I think a lot of the people that are giving the most would be the first ones to tell you that they feel like they should be giving more.
mhm,
And that's the heart change, I think.
mhm, mhm,
But our story, my parents not only have on their own become very generous and been leading with a personal mission to give a lot of their abundance away to others, but they've been very intentional at engaging the family in this and truly establishing a legacy of giving. One of the ways that they've done this, probably 12 years ago, we started an annual giving meeting, usually around Thanksgiving. It changes based on people's availability, but when it initially started, my parents asked for every member of the family, including our son, who was like 7 at the time,
mhm,
to come up with an organization, find an organization they believed in the mission of, and then they would have to present that to the rest of the family. We had like a big family meeting. They'd have to
mhm,
present in front of the family about the organization's mission, their programs, and then make a suggestion for like a donation amount. And then we would all kind of discuss it and give that. Um, I then made the suggestion that while that is a great example, we're basically, it's like monopoly money to the rest of the family because we're just giving
mm,
away Mimi and Papa's money. And so
mhm,
I had made the recommendation that going forward, everybody could give to an organization during the year, and then maybe Mimi and Papa, my parents, could match that amount.
mhm,
And so even if that was $25 by the youngest grandchild, they would, I believe they matched the grandchildren's giving 10 to 1,
mhm,
and then our giving like 2 to 1 or 5 to 1 or something. And so we started that, and it started a lot of the conversation about why we give, who we give to. There are some parameters. Again, it's a Christian organization, or at least one that does not go against the teachings of Scripture. My parents specifically focus on helping widows and children, or women and children, I should say, and then also sharing the gospel. So they're two of their organizations they support are the Bible translation organization. So Faith Comes by Hearing and Wycliffe. Those are two they're very involved with. So either helping women and children or sharing the gospel are kind of their areas of focus. So the giving meeting is one way that we started doing this. Another way is around the same time, my parents started our family foundation, which is called True Vine Foundation. It's called that based on John 15. I just found out, I didn't even know this at the time, but the reason that ended up being the name is my dad was covering John 15 in a Bible study the morning that the people starting the foundation for us reached out and asked for a name. And so that I was just going to read the start of John 15.
Mhm.
I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me.
Mhm.
I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. And if anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you. But this by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, so you will be my disciples. And that is kind of the guiding principle for our family foundation. So that's kind of what we're here on earth to do, is to bear fruit, and to always recognize who we come from. So,
Mhm.
and who is the vine dresser, and just so we started that a couple years ago, and there's 6 of us in the family that are on the board. So we have that. That's one area. And then we all have donor advised funds through the signatory. There's other organizations, National Christian Foundation, that manage those. A donor advised fund is actually a really unique and wonderful vehicle for giving. It's the organization that holds the donor advised fund is a 501c3. So you put money in there and get the tax deduction, but then it
Mhm.
can sit in there as long as you want until you decide to send it out. So if you wanted to put, say, $100 in a donor advised fund, you could 6 months later decide to send 50 out, or there might be $100 minimum to give, but so you put $1,000 in, and then let's say you want to do $100 to one organization, and then 2 months later $200 to another, but you don't have to make those decisions right away. So
That's
you
nice.
can put the money in, which is really great for planning, because families can in January say, okay, we're going to donate $1,000 this year. And they can put that in their donor advised fund and then kind of see where the year takes them from a giving standpoint. So we all have, um, my husband and I have a DAF. My brother and sister-in-law have a DAF. My parents have a DAF. And then there's also, my parents have formed a donor advised fund for Generation 3 to manage.
Mm.
So that's the grandchildren. And so they are 32 down to 19. And so they meet once a year. They're given a certain number of dollars out of the True Vine Foundation,
Mhm.
and they have to get together and each present an organization and decide how they're going to give that money.
Wow.
So it's
That's
really
really
it's really through there's just many areas that we're involved with in teaching generosity to all the generations. I would say the other thing is just specifically in our household, and like one of my missions, and then I've seen my parents do this so many times over the years, is to answer the call.
Mm,
So we like to plan, and prepare for giving, but sometimes a call comes out where there's a need. And I think we all need to work harder at saying yes to God and no to the world.
mm, yeah.
So,
And sometimes even no to ourselves.
oh, 100%. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we get in our own way as much as the world does.
Yeah. Yes.
Sometimes.
Well, and
Yeah.
another thing that my parents have done, which is why I talked to my dad before coming on today, is because they do 90% of their giving completely anonymously.
Hmm.
And some of it is very big projects, and they do everything anonymously. And that's again just from Matthew. Like it's, your left hand should know what your right hand's doing.
Hmm.
Don't be um, don't be sounding a trumpet before yourself, like saying, look at me, look what I'm giving. And
Yes.
so it's all done in line with scripture.
Hmm.
I do think that there is benefit in sharing your generosity path
Hmm.
with humility that
Hmm.
can help encourage others do the same.
Yeah,
So,
because I think, the reality is I think most people really want to be able to do something to
mhm,
give back because they know it is good for all of us. I mean, generosity is so good for our spirits and our, just our
absolutely.
well-being.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people don't know exactly how to do it. So by sharing your
Mhm.
story and your family's story, I think it helps inspire people to think about, okay, how could we do this? Maybe we can't, you know, give radically, but really, I mean, Jesus said the woman who gave 2 coins
Right.
gave radically because that's all she
Absolutely. Yeah.
so it's not
Yeah.
about the dollar amount,
Yeah.
it is about the heart and,
Absolutely.
our willingness
And not
to
being under compulsion, because the ones that were giving more were giving under compulsion and saying, look at me, look what I'm doing. I'm dropping my coins as loud as I can so
right.
people can hear it. And she was very, um, she was following scripture. She was doing
Yes.
it out of her heart. Yes.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So yeah, I think it's important for people to hear what generosity looks like walked out. If they've not had an example, if they've not, for me, it was always we went to church and my grandmother, I knew they didn't have a lot, but
mhm,
every Sunday she passed the envelope over across my lap to the plate because they had in that day, envelopes with
right.
your name
Yep.
on it every
I
single week.
remember.
And that really, it just spoke to me that,
Yeah.
even though they don't have a lot, I don't know what's in the
Yep.
envelope, but I know she does
Right.
it every just
Oh,
that
yeah.
consistency and to
Right.
see that example.
Well, and again, we're called to do that. And so I think I think generosity gets easier the more time you spend in God's word.
Mhm,
Because I think when you realize that it's not yours to begin with,
mhm,
and I think there's less fear in generosity when you're
mhm.
closer to God
Yeah.
and more invested and spend more time in His Word and how He's calling us to live.
Mhm,
I think it gets easier. So, and then once you start it,
mhm.
it's kind of snowballs.
Yeah.
So, and then, I mean, I know I talked about big things like family foundations and donor advised funds and stuff, but there's so many ways, smaller ways, but not less
Mhm,
impactful. It's
mhm,
taking a meal to someone who's sick.
mhm,
If you see we see those GoFundMe type things, but like you see one where a teacher needs $25 to help outfit her classroom.
mhm.
I mean, or just sending a note of gratitude to somebody. I mean, there's so many ways people can be generous in
Mhm,
spirit,
mhm.
that maybe doesn't seem as daunting as some of these
Mhm.
other ways. Um,
But they're
I
equally as
mentioned,
impactful a
I'm
lot of time.
sorry. Yeah,
They're
yeah,
equally as impactful. Mhm,
absolutely. And it's the other ways are important too, the bigger ways, because there's honestly a lot of people, especially in our nation, that
mm,
have a tremendous amount of wealth, but they either don't know how to give, or
Hmm.
they don't understand why they should. And
Right.
so I think it's really important to share those things that, there are vehicles to make it easier to do that. And there's companies that can help you um, kind of manage your philanthropy and how you're giving back. But again, whether, you have $10 to your name or $10 million to your name, I mean, the first and best step I would say is just getting the word.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
best guidebook for how to start. So,
Yeah. I think that's
mhm.
what really starts to turn our eyes more to the eternal perspective rather than the worldly perspective, and gets our minds off ourselves and our worries, and definitely helps us put our trust in God much more when we
Yes,
understand more about who he is and what he
right.
offers.
Yeah.
There's a verse that oops, sorry. There's a verse that in I think it's, and I can't remember, but it says, "It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom."
Mm,
So, he wants to be generous to us. He wants to pour out his blessing. He wants to give
absolutely.
us his wisdom. There's nothing he holds back from us if we ask. And
Hmm.
so, the more we get to know him as that good father who wants to bless us, the easier it is to soak that up and then give it out. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, and it's not, I think the more you just remember that it's not ours,
Hmm.
you know, and not that he wants us all to be impoverished or suffering, because he doesn't, there's nothing wrong with wealth becomes a problem when it becomes your idol.
Hmm.
And so being successful or having, you know, a home and like there's nothing wrong with that. It's where your treasure is, your heart is also.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's the biggest, I think if there's one verse that explains the importance of generosity and why we should be generous, that's it. Because where's our heart?
Yeah.
Where are we focused?
Mhm.
Is it on the next new car? Is it on, the next trip, the next purse, the next whatever? Because none of that's going to fill any kind of gap in our lives.
And we can't take
But
it with us.
right, absolutely. So, but sharing the love of Christ, whether that's in a secular way or not,
Mhm.
you're still doing his work and allowing, um, the opportunity for the Holy Spirit to enter into that place. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I hear you. So what are some ways, like, how did you get involved in nonprofits? What are some ways that you walk this generosity out in your personal life?
that is just an interesting journey. I've kind of always liked to be. It used to be called a candy striper, but in the
Yeah.
hospital,
Yeah.
when I was in middle school, and I think I've always just kind of gravitated towards helping in one way or another.
Mhm.
And when I was, so the kids were little, so it was maybe 12 years ago or so. Again, everything's kind of falling around the same time frame, but I was really looking for a way to get involved in some community service, and I joined a local organization. And community service and volunteering was a part of what they did, but a much bigger part was the social aspect, which wasn't something I was looking for. And so I was coming back from one of those events and went to my son's t-ball game, and I was talking to one of the dads, and um, he was telling me about an organization that he'd started up recently in the neighborhood, helping local families who have kids with cancer. And this organization pays for their financial um, bills, so mortgage, rent, car, whatever, utilities. If they need gas cards, they just help pay for that stuff. And I was immediately intrigued, and it was just a grassroots organization. So I joined them to help plan their first ever gala. I'd never been to a charity gala at the time, but I'm a girl, so we can plan a party.
Right.
And so I did that, and I ended up being on the board for about 7 years. I was president for two of those, and it really filled a hole. I have backgrounds in both business and nursing, and so it was a really good fit. the just from the being on the ground and helping and serving, but also being in the boardroom. I really enjoyed all aspects of it. And so that was um, the first organization I was involved with at that level. And then I started getting involved with some local organizations like a pro-life center here, and just in various ways, helping on event committee, or I was also very involved in our church for many, many years, doing all sorts of different things at different levels. And then got involved with James Project um, in 2019. And it was also that fall that I was at a women's generosity event put on by the Signatory. And the woman who was leading it approached me and we got talking, and she told me she'd had it on her heart to start a Christian women's giving circle, but didn't know how to do it. And so I said, well, I'll help you. I mean, I like to say yes to things. So
Mhm.
so we started with the help of several other women. We started Seeds of Joy, which is a Christian women's giving circle here in Kansas City. Launched it in 2022, and I've since sat as the chair of the grants team. So I our team receives all the grant applications from local nonprofits, and we review those and then give out the grants every spring at our spring gathering. So it's been very edifying and fulfilling, and I love interacting with nonprofits. I love meeting with the executive directors, learning about their missions. There are so many, like more than I ever thought possible in our area, and I'm sure it's the same in every single metropolitan area. There's not a lack of Christ-based organizations for people to get involved with.
That's wonderful.
Um, so Seeds of Joy has been a gift. Just to be also just be with other Christian women
Mhm.
serving the community has been really great. And then recently just joined another board of a local nonprofit. And it's interesting because I do love the board work. I also miss the hands-on boots on the ground. For 2 years, I worked in a food pantry downtown every Tuesday,
Mhm.
and um, interacting with the clients that would come in and out was a highlight of my week. Um,
Mhm.
it was on one end humbling, but on the other, they're just, I mean, wonderful people. Like it was just, great. I think it's important to get out of our bubble,
Mhm.
which was my reason for taking my kids to Guatemala.
Yeah.
So yeah, um,
Yeah. Did they enjoy being out of their bubble while they were there? I know they
they
weren't super.
did.
Yeah.
They did. They didn't think that they would, but they
Mhm.
did. It was kind of, I think, a life-changing trip for all of us.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it was very, very impactful. It's hard. I tell people when you go down there, your heart will be broken in a million pieces in the best way possible.
Mhm.
And I also have to say, like, it's a necessary breaking of the heart.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, people need to see how so much of the rest of the world lives.
Mhm.
And it's really introspective, I guess. It causes you to be introspective because these people have nothing. Most of them are sleeping on dirt floors or have no food, and the atrocities that the women and children served by James Project see is just, they're unspeakable.
Mhm.
And yet they have so much joy in their heart because they have
Mhm.
Jesus.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember one of the things our daughter said was that, just how these people have nothing or next to nothing, but she witnessed God so much more down there than she does here in America.
Yeah. And the way I attribute that is, and I've talked to my kids about this, is they need God in a way that we're too comfortable to need him up here.
Absolutely.
You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like, you
Yep.
look at the Israelites and anybody in the Old Testament, every time they got comfortable, they fell away from God. Do you know any, like, the different kings
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
cited?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's sad to think that desperation is what we need as humans. God doesn't want to. put us
Right.
in desperate situations, but
Right.
that we would need that to recognize him in our lives. My
Yep.
prayer has always been that I can remember that I need him no matter the day. So I don't,
Yes.
I've asked not, I don't want a desperate situation to have
Yep.
to be reminded.
Yep.
But I mean, I still find myself in those positions where I get
Yep.
too comfortable and,
Well, and I think as fallible, sinful humans, we are very, very quick to ask for help
mhm,
and very, very slow to give praise and thanksgiving,
yeah.
especially in the small things, right?
Mhm,
Like, you made it to work and there was no traffic. And,
mhm.
just the things that we almost come to
Expect.
expect,
Mhm,
right? Like you said, we get comfortable. And I
mhm,
think we forget to um, praise him in those moments, and forget that all blessings come from him.
mhm.
Um, yeah, people are, I think, remember, excuse me, remember their faith in times of trouble
Yeah,
more so.
yeah,
Mhm.
and that's what draws the people in third world countries so close to him, like in Guatemala, because they're
Right.
always in times of need and trouble,
Mhm.
and so they have that closeness with him that we tend to distance ourselves from
Right.
because we don't need it in the same
Right.
way,
And
but,
that's just human nature. I mean, we all do it. We all
we
do
do.
it. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but you're right, you see him working so much more profoundly down there than you see him up
Hmm.
here because we
Yep.
are just a country that's not so much in need, or we don't
Yep.
think we are because we're
Right.
comfortable. We have food on the table, most of us, and, things like
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in the same note, the other reaction from our kids is one of the things our son said when he was presenting in front of church after the trip was, um, I went down there thinking I was going to change those kids' lives, and in reality, they ended up changing mine.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to explain. I mean, we
It
can
really
talk
is.
about it, like you can
Yeah.
tell people about all day long, but until they set foot on that property, they're not going to really understand.
Yeah, because it's just not
So,
something we experience up here.
right.
I mean, we can try,
Yeah.
like the different things, working at a food pantry or,
Hmm.
delivering meals for the senior center, something like that. It's a it's a small amount of it, but when you're there for a solid week and you're seeing it lived out every day, it's very different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
So, and that was the other thing. It's so funny when secular science catches up with what we already know about the Bible and God. I was
Right.
listening to, I think it was an NPR um, article the other day about about gratitude. You were saying that, to be
Yeah.
grateful and how much there's a whole like study going on about gratitude and helping people because it helps people out of their loneliness or their depression, just being grateful and
Yeah.
having a gratitude practice. And, he tells us that be praise in all things. I'm totally botching this, but
Right.
I
No,
mean,
absolutely.
it says
Yeah.
rejoice in all things, pray
Yep.
continually, and give thanks in every
Yep.
situation. That's in
Yep.
Thessalonians.
Yep.
And it's so funny to listen to people who don't know the Bible talk about the truth of that and how they're doing a whole study to
Yeah.
the scientific proof of what happens in our brains and in our hearts and how it lifts our mood and all of those things just to be grateful when it's been in the Bible this whole time.
Yep. 100%. And there's so many, and generosity is the same way. And I think there's even non-believers who would
Mhm.
tell you that they feel good when they give.
Yes, absolutely.
So there definitely is a true physical component
Mhm.
to doing that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting outside yourself.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
So, and you had mentioned before a verse in First Timothy about why
Yeah.
it's important to give. Like,
Yeah. Well,
tell
we're
me a little.
commanded because it
Right.
says it says, I have it sitting on my desk all the time. It says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life.
Mm,
So there's at least twice in that verse where the word command is used.
mhm,
Um, and, God commands us to do things that are good for us.
mhm, mhm,
And because he knows like it's going to benefit us here on earth, but it's also to help us follow his other commandments. Like they all go hand in hand.
mhm,
So to love our neighbors as ourselves, we are to give and to be generous.
mhm.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting once you dive in,
Mhm,
again, getting back to God's word. Like if there's ever a doubt, get into God's word. And there's so many Bible Gateway, Bible Hub, like
mhm,
there's all these websites where you can just type in a subject matter and
mhm,
see what God's word says
mhm.
um about this, how to
Yeah,
live and how to be generous and all of that. So
yeah.
um
My son actually found an app that you can put in like a topic and it'll bring up all the Bible verses
oh,
and
that's amazing.
I can't remember what
Yeah.
the app is, but yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of really helpful
Yeah.
tools out there to
Yep.
learn more about God and what He
Well,
asks.
and I think honestly, when I was reviewing some of the verses, like, and I
Mm,
knew this one, but like reading it again really just drove it home. But the Matthew 25,
mhm,
when he's saying, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat, and I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink, and I was a stranger and you invited me in, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, well, Lord, when did we see you hungry? Like, when were you thirsty? When did we invite you in? And he said, truly, I say to you, to the extent that you did to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did to me.
mhm,
And so, knowing like we are not just serving other inhabitants here on earth, like we are serving Jesus.
mhm,
We are serving God by helping these people.
mhm,
And that is I think it's just a stark reminder to us all of the impact of what we're doing when we you know, take a piece of food to somebody or
mhm,
a kind word
mhm.
or, go visit someone when they're lonely. Again, it doesn't have to be grand.
Right,
It
right.
just needs to be outside yourself, meeting the needs of someone else.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful not to judge. My dad has the saying, he said, "It's not my job to determine whether they deserve help. It's
Oh,
my job."
100%. Yeah.
You know, and I love that because it takes out that judgment because we're so tempted to be like, we see somebody on the street that's asking for money. Well, they're just going to go buy alcohol. Well, what if they're not?
Yeah. Yeah.
My attitude to that is if it were my child, I would want someone to give them the benefit of the doubt. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Well, and there's also Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So
Mm,
while not a Christ-based paradigm, but it's, someone who has maybe issues with alcohol or drugs or whatever the situation is, if they don't have shelter, if they're hungry, if they're
mm,
thirsty, if they don't have access to medical treatment, they're not going to be able to deal with
right.
overcoming that
Hmm.
hurdle. Like there are first needs that need to be met, and I
Hmm.
think that's to your point, something that we tend to forget. We just see the person in the moment,
Hmm.
and immediately put on our judge and jury caps. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that when my dad was saying, it's not my job to determine whether they deserve it. It's just my job
Right.
to help if I
Mhm.
can.
Yeah,
And I tried to remember
yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, and
And
I
then,
think sorry, but this might be a little bit of a segue, but on that, I think it is fair to um, judge organizations.
okay, yes.
So there are a lot of organizations out there. Most are doing really, really good work. Um,
Mhm,
Many of those are doing so efficiently and effectively, but not all. And
mhm,
so I think it's important when you are choosing to give to organizations, that you either do research, and that could involve just going through their website, looking at their social media, um, sending them an email with questions, calling and asking questions, or like if you have if you happen to have a donor advised fund,
Mhm.
that company that's managing that can tell you things about the organization and how well-rounded they are and how efficient they are. There's also websites like Charity Navigator and GuideStar where you can do some research, or just go be on property, volunteer, see how they work. Um, One of the measurements used is the like a program expense ratio. I saw, I think it was Charity Navigator. One of them said that they like to have it above 70%. So that
Mhm.
means that at least 70% of funds that come in revenue goes directly to programming.
Mhm.
Personally, I like it to be 80, 85. Like that would be, better, is would be more my target, um, because it's less money. You're into a situation where there could be too much money going to the pockets of the
Mhm.
people running it. Um, and so that's something to look at. There's a lot of ways to evaluate the organization because you want your money to be used well. You worked for it, right?
Mhm.
It is God's, but you worked for it. You worked hard for that paycheck. And so you want to make sure, just like when you're researching a new appliance to buy or something else, I think it's important and valuable to ensure that where you're sending it is going to be used appropriately.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. So, and that's one of the things I love about the James Project is they do these vision trips for people who
Yes.
want to make sure that the organization is legit and go down and visit and see what it's all about. Because on those vision trips, you get a tour of the whole property, an explanation of what they're doing. It's all laid out for you. So,
Yep.
uh, I think that's a wonderful thing that they do. That I don't know if other organizations do it or not. I hope they
Yeah.
do, but I
I
think it's
agree.
yeah, I think it's a really
Yes.
great way to ensure that you can trust what they're doing.
Yep. And that's, I mean, honestly, that is why I would not be on the board of an organization nor personally support an organization that I didn't think was walking with the Lord first and foremost, but also efficient and effective with my funding and my time.
Mhm.
And I have been, I mean, since our visit there in 2019, I've been just blown away by Tiffany and Brian and how they run the organization, how it's all led by faith, how well they care for their staff.
Mhm.
They invest in them not just from a work perspective, but from a personal perspective. They're like family. They are just amazing, beautiful stewards of the money that they get. We don't start projects down there till we have the funding for it. They're willing to pivot and swivel when God kind of says, well, we were going to do this, but now we're going to go this direction. They've started like this great sustainability project down there, so they grow their own crops, and they're just working on ways to be less dependent on the government, and and just to be more self-reliant,
Mhm.
um, and just to be able to come back to their donors and say, this is how we're putting your money to work, and not to have to worry about pushback on that.
Mhm.
I never worry. Like when someone asks me how the money will be used, it's always going to be used in a way that glorifies God at James Project.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm. So you mentioned you took your family down in 2019. What was your first impression when you got there? Did you have an idea of what to expect? Was it totally different than what you expected? What were your thoughts?
um, that's hard because so the very first impression, we pull up and the gates open,
Mhm.
and lining the road into the project are dozens of kids,
Oh.
excuse me, with signs and cheering and song and like welcoming us. And we don't know them, right? They don't know us. And they're just so excited to have guests. They're so excited to have people to spend time with. And I mean, very major language barrier. I can string together a couple words, but basically they spent the whole week laughing at me trying to speak Spanish. But it was, yeah, I mean, it was just really interesting because I don't really know that I knew what to expect.
Mhm.
But it was just, there's so many hugs and
Mhm.
smiles. And, I mean, these children have truly been rescued. And I think
Mhm.
they know it. You know, they
Mhm.
know that they've been rescued and they love being there. And, they're just grateful for anyone who wants to play with them or pray with them or just sit next to them.
Mhm.
So, and the house parents are great. And yeah, it was a really amazing, like I kind of went into it thinking, oh, I'm gonna get my kids out of their bubble. And I mean, I
Mhm.
really got myself out of my bubble too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. So
Hmm.
what was different for you coming back? Did
Hmm.
something, I mean,
Hmm.
you clearly already spent many years involved in nonprofits and giving back with your time and your talents and things like that. But was there a shift at all? Did anything change when you came back?
It is just a whole different level of destitution and poverty and um evil. I mean, there's so much of that down there that and the things being done to these women and children and um the corruption. It's just
The lack of justice. Yeah.
yes. I think it just widened. It was kind of like tunnel visioned in the
Mhm.
whole, not that there aren't poor people in America because there are a lot. And I'm not trying to diminish the needs in America at all because I
Mhm.
know there are people sleeping on the ground all
Mhm.
over our country. I know there are people going hungry all over. I know there are people being abused and in awful situations in our country that um we were kind of front and center with a lot of that down there. And so there's certainly places that you can go to serve those people here too. But um I don't know, like it wasn't in hiding there. And it just really broadened I guess our worldly horizon.
Mhm.
um so I think it really, like I said before, it broke my heart in
Mhm.
all the most necessary and best of ways. um
Right.
so that you can't walk away from that and say, well, I did my week, I'm good.
Mhm. Right.
You walk away from there saying, what else can I do? And if
Mhm.
nothing else, I need to tell other people about this place and about what's going on and how they can help. So,
Mhm. But you were saying that it's very much that we get in our own little bubble up here. And for
yeah,
me, when I go down and come back, it helps me to have eyes clearer to see, like when I go to Shaw's or, when I go shopping or when I'm running an errand in town, I find that I'm more apt to see someone on the side of the road that looks
yes,
like they need help or just hearing other people, you hear
yep,
of a need in town, you're quicker to respond. I feel like that's what it's done for me, is just given me a better out of the box experience when I'm home, that I remind myself not to stay in my own little world, that there
yep,
are people hurting all around me that I can impact in some way if
yeah.
I just keep my eyes open.
Well, and it's also not something that's always visible. So,
Right.
um, yeah, I mean, I think in some way it taught me that there's hurting people out there that might not even look like they're hurting.
Mm,
And I think that just comes from the kids that are on property there, again, have gone through so much and they might be running around laughing with their friends, but hearing their stories, you know, at least bits and pieces of what they've gone through, and it gives you new
mm,
perspective on people here, like in your own
right.
neighborhood. And
Mhm.
you really don't know anybody's story.
Mhm.
So if somebody, is in a bad mood or doesn't respond right or slams on their horn or you don't know what came before that.
Right. You don't
So,
know what they're going through. You
mhm.
don't know what's on their plate at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. just a greater sense of compassion, it sounds like,
Yes.
all around.
Yes. That is exactly the word.
Mhm.
So,
How do you think it's changed your kids, or how do you hope it's changed your kids to go down?
I mean, again, I would just say perspective.
Mhm,
Um, just to see that and to know how other people are living and, how other people can find joy in the midst of so much darkness.
mhm.
Um, I don't know. And then just, it's okay to give up some of your own personal time to
Yeah.
go be with other people. Um, I don't know. think it was just an awareness. And I'm
Mhm,
hoping that they carry that with them. I mean, it was 5 years ago now that we're down there. Um, but I hope that in some way, shape, or form, whether they return to the mission field again or not, that they
mhm.
carry that experience with them and that it helps them form their responses to people and situations in the future.
Yeah, yeah, I
I highly
agree.
recommend a family mission trip. Like
Mhm,
anybody who's even, and I've told people this, like if you are even remotely considering it, say yes
mhm.
and go. Like you will not regret it. Yes, it costs money. Yes, it's 7 or 8 days out of your life. You will not regret it. I
Yeah,
guarantee that. So,
yeah,
mhm,
I agree, I agree. So, having the experience that you do with nonprofits
mhm,
and generosity and all of that, what advice would you give? Like, end of year giving is always a big thing, and I'm really glad that the timing worked out really well for us to do this podcast now, because I think the timing is important. Not that we planned it that way, but that it worked out this way, because some people listening may not be able to give like a massive amount of money,
mhm.
but there are people that have, and that will multiply a gift, any gift that someone gives, up to
Yep.
$125,000 with a
Yes.
match right now. So, what advice would you give to people who are on the fence, or trying to think about, where do I give money to? How does this work? What is it even going to do? Like, what's the
Mhm.
purpose? Like, what would my money even do? If I have $25, what's that even going to do? So what advice would you give?
Um, First, I would say everyone can give something, and $25, it does more than you think it could do. For like $30, a James Project can buy a chicken,
Wow.
and that chicken then provides eggs for the
Hmm.
project. $35 a month sponsors a child.
Hmm.
So there's no too small of an amount.
Hmm.
I would say just the end of year giving in general, just do it. I mean, it starts small. Find an organization you're passionate about. If you don't know of any organizations or you don't know where to give, ask your friends and family organizations that they're passionate about and why. If they don't have anything, check with your church.
Hmm.
And then just listen to the needs around you, to the radio. I mean, this time of year on the radio, they're talking about all sorts of organizations that need assistance, and or there's might be a place that needs shoes, or I guess just be open to where God is leading you to give, and
Hmm.
how to do that. As far as James Project, we have the match, that's helping to build out the Widows Village.
Hmm.
So again, if you're like, oh, I only have $50 to give, well, your $50 is now 100 with that
Hmm.
match. Um,
Right.
and with, I mean, there's no amount that's going to do nothing. So
Hmm.
every dollar matters. Every dollar impacts somebody else's life in some way, shape, or form. Um,
Hmm.
so I would just say, just start. And then, that starts a process, a domino effect of your heart trending toward generosity, where it doesn't become a thought, it's just your automatic reaction.
Hmm.
And again, it doesn't always have to be writing a check. It's
Yeah.
showing up. It's simply
Right.
showing up when God calls you. Um,
Mhm.
so, and then, yeah, I mean, that's what, as far as James Project goes, again, the match goes through the end of the year. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, they just do a phenomenal job, and they are truly, they are changing lives.
Mhm.
In true reality, they are saving lives here on earth in
Mhm.
many ways, but more importantly, they are saving lives for eternity, which I mean, there's nothing greater you could ask of any organization. So,
Right. I know, and I've mentioned this a few times in my last few podcasts because it was such a blessing to me. When we went down in August, Hair Bear asked me to interview the girls that now work there, but grew up there. And
yeah,
it was so wonderful to sit with them and just hear their stories of how they ended up there, all the trauma they'd been through that led them to get there. And then not only what the James Project was able to do for them physically, because obviously they had a safe place to sleep, they had food, they had clothing, they had an education. But some of them talked about learning how to forgive and learning how to
mm,
trust people and learning that they didn't have to live the same way their nuclear family lived, their
yeah,
biological family lived. There was another way forward, a better life for them that they had agency to now pursue because they'd been shown and they'd been loved and they'd been taught, especially, I mean, that forgiveness piece was so impactful for them so that they could let that go and it wouldn't continue to poison future generations because of the unforgiveness that they held in their heart. I mean, that's remarkable. You
absolutely.
know,
Yeah,
how that an organization can do all of that. It was
yep,
just, I was so blessed to hear their stories and to see their heart and their desire for a long time before they had gotten back there to work, that that's what they always wanted to do. That we, you know, I always wanted to be able to give back even a little bit of what has been given to me to the organization. So how happy
yeah,
they are to work there and to be with those kids that they can relate to, you
right.
know?
And that's, I mean, they are healing the whole person
Exactly.
and future generations.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's remarkable.
yeah,
And so
it
it's so
really is.
impactful to just to be able to be part of it and to see it firsthand and to know that um, anyone can have a part in that, whether that's through the JPLA, which we would be thrilled to have more
Right.
people
Yeah,
participate in. But even, you know, is there someone in your family you need to forgive this year that need to
yes.
let that go? You know, what is it that would be most impactful for people at the end of the year to just start the year clean
Yep.
by giving
Yep.
something of themselves? Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I would say, like, to anybody who's I run into people, especially with Seeds of Joy, with the Women's Giving Circle, who they want to start giving. They would like to start a generosity plan with their family. It just seems daunting. It seems
Hmm.
like a huge task. And again, I would say just start baby steps. So whether that's create a family mission statement. It doesn't have to be anything formal. It can be written on a piece of white paper, but
Hmm.
sit down and create a mission statement around your goals for like what kind of organizations you want to give to, or what kind of legacy you want to leave, or just, it could be as simple as the dollar amount. And that dollar amount can be, we're going to give $200 away this year.
Hmm.
Um, so decide that in January. Like, maybe do a mission statement, maybe not. Maybe that seems, too stressful. But
Hmm.
decide a dollar amount you want to give for the year, and then, discuss that through the year and either say, well, we're going to do that at Thanksgiving, or, I mean, almost better yet, listen throughout the year for
Hmm.
causes that come to you. And then my suggestion is to challenge yourself to outgive that.
Hmm.
So, I mean, set a realistic goal that you feel comfortable with, but with the challenge being that you're going to give over that.
Hmm.
And again, it's not just money. So maybe say
Right.
once a month, my goal is to do something kind with my time or my talent for somebody
Hmm.
else.
Right.
But it's really about intentionality.
Hmm.
I think to get started, but it's just baby steps.
Hmm.
And I think recognizing that you want to do it is
Hmm.
huge. I mean, that's the heart, right? That's
Right.
the
Right.
heart. Yeah, saying that this is where I want to be right now is giving
Mhm.
and being generous with what has been given to me. So,
Yeah, and you know, having that heart and not exactly knowing what you want to do. I felt that with just quick story. I felt that way when my kids were small. My daughter was like 6 months old and my son was almost 3. And I just felt like I should be doing more. Like I just had a desire to do something else. And so I had reached out to a couple of people that had different things they were doing that were helping the community and they just didn't seem to fit. Like I didn't seem to fit there. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, And so I had
Yeah.
been praying about it, and every morning for like 2 months, I would hear this ad on the radio about delivering food for the senior center
Mm.
every morning. And so one morning after hearing it for about a week, I got up and wrote down the number on my to-do list, like, oh, yeah, that sounds like something we might be able to do, and I'll get to it. And then one morning when I called after about 2 months, I hadn't heard the ad anymore, but I still had my to-do list sitting there and I had a minute. So I'm like, I'm going to try to tackle some of these things. And I called and the woman was like, yeah, because she thought it was from the radio station, like looking for
Oh.
money for the ad,
Mhm.
because she said, we don't know who put that ad on there. We didn't
Oh.
hear, like, I heard it and I called and I asked everyone around and we didn't know who put it on there. And I was like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
So you never know what God will bring across your
Yep.
path. And then we proceeded to deliver for the senior center for like 5 years every Friday and
Oh,
made some of the greatest
awesome.
friends. And there are so many stories about that experience, but it just was, you know, it was an easy, I mean, I say easy, getting a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old out the door on a Friday morning
Mhm.
at a certain time. We were always late, but it was a relatively easy thing to do that didn't cost us any money. I'd pack a lunch and we'd picnic somewhere after, and
Yep.
uh, but just an opportunity to even start that process with them, and
Right.
we just enjoyed it. So it can be something, and like you were saying, if you don't know, pray about it, and I'm sure God will bring something across your path that
Yep.
is a good fit.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I mean, like you said, you made the decision to just go deliver meals every
mhm.
week. It could be a meal once. Like
Yes,
it doesn't have
right,
to be done. And like I'm fortunate where I don't work outside the home, so I have the time to invest in these causes.
right,
I fully recognize that most people don't. So it
right,
doesn't have to be big. It
right.
really doesn't.
Hmm.
And same with money. Like again, it does not have to be a large dollar amount. It's just a recognition of sharing,
Yes,
one of the most
yeah,
basic principles that we teach our kids.
hmm,
And then I think sometimes we forget as we, get to be adults and get comfortable. And there's, a lot of pressures and whatnot, but there's that quote that the happiest people are the givers. And
hmm,
I would change that to from happiest to most joyful, because I mean
yeah,
truly the way to know real joy is just to know Jesus. And
hmm,
and I think giving and being generous because of your relationship with him is just, I mean, it is the ultimate provider of joy. So
hmm, hmm. Yeah, and the acronym for joy is Jesus, others, and then
yes.
yourself. Have you
Yep.
seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
really making sure
Yes.
that, we're in that order, and it doesn't say you don't have healthy boundaries and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff with the joy.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
mhm,
it's been this generosity journey kind of started with our my parents, but it's just been just a beautiful thing, and it's been an evolutionary process.
mhm,
But it's been, I mean, a true gift to the whole family, but I would say especially like, the grandkids and now the great grandkids. My parents have 6 great grandkids. And
aw,
so, the goal is just to continue this. I don't know, just to continue to spread God's love. So,
mhm. What a beautiful, beautiful story, to share, and, the story of your family, to just that legacy that you are building into all of that, all of you, and to see it passed down to your kids. It's gonna be such a joy to see them
mhm,
living out that generosity life, because you know the joy it's gonna bring them
right.
and
Well,
freedom.
and I mean, I think my favorite part and the most important part is like my parents started this and continue to do so, giving all the glory to God. Like
Mhm,
they don't say any of what they have as theirs. And, they try to instill in us that it's not ours. And, we have the benefit and the privilege of sharing what he has given us, um, and telling other people about him in the process. So
mhm. Yeah, yeah. And for most of the year, I forgot toward the end, or didn't as often, but I would end each podcast with this quote of Mother Teresa's, that we can't all do big things, but we can all do small things with great love. And
absolutely.
I just think your family story is a wonderful example of that, especially hearing how little your family had to begin with,
Hmm.
and to see how God has been able to pour out blessings that you can't contain so that you can give to others. Because he
Yep,
says, with the measure we give out to others, he will pour into us and then
absolutely.
some. So,
Yep,
yeah.
he's pretty
So thank you.
amazing that way.
Yeah.
So
Did we miss anything that you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful to be a part of James Project, and yeah, just Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to you. And thank you for doing this. And tell your family I said thank you as well.
Okay, I will.
All right.